What's up, YouTubes? Welcome back to the Cutlass Board Games channel. My name is Keith and I make board games for a living, and that's why I like playing around with designing Magic the Gathering cards. This is my third video on looking at League of Legends champions and trying to translate the mechanics from League of Legends into Magic the Gathering with a specific focus on them being a commander, because designing a card to be a commander plays differently than if it's just going to be in the draft or something like that. We can kind of see this very obviously in the Spider-Man set, where there is a lot of legendary creatures in there, but are they really all specifically supposed to be commanders? Not really. Some of them, which do a lot more, like you could say the transform cards, are a bit better of a fit. And my personal preference is 3 color commanders around the 4 or 5 cost, and so that's why I have designed stuff like that. I'm going to be looking at 4 different champions, and some of them I will give some additional cards as context for inspirations, except Dr. Mundo. Now, Dr. Mundo is a very special League of Legends champion. He is often brought up when people talk about complexity creep, and they compare Dr. Mundo passive, which just says you regenerate health, with Senna passive, for example, which is like an entire novel. And so I kind of wanted to lean into that a little bit. Like, I didn't want Mundo to do nothing, but I wanted life to be a big central part of his kit, because what he does do in the game is regenerate health, and that's not really something that translates very well to Magic the Gathering, because you kind of automatically regenerate Leave Toughness at the end of the turn, and healing it before the end of the turn doesn't really make that much of a difference. So I settled on this design for the card. Dr. Mundo, Dubious Physician, a colorless green, black, and red. Legendary creature, human warrior, 4 power, 4 toughness. If you would gain life, put that many +1/+1 counters on Dr. Mundo instead. At the beginning of each combat, if you lost life this turn, Dr. Mundo fights up to 1 target creature. So there are some cards that can make Dr. Mundo very, very large, where you just kind of gain a bunch of life. But also there's a lot of cards that can kind of guarantee that he will fight something at the beginning of each combat, not just your combat, each combat, by making you pay life. Hex Parasite is a great example, because it has an ability that can activate where it is Phyrexian Black and X, and you can have X be 0, so you pay Phyrexian Black every single turn, and Mundo fights something. Now, this is not infinite, because you have a limited health pool, and you can't gain life because Dr. Mundo prevents that. He gets larger instead. So doing something like giving Dr. Mundo lifelink can double his power every time he deals damage, and also fighting stuff is a great way to clear the path for him to be able to connect with a player. The goal of Dr. Mundo here is to go face, and you want to connect and deal as much damage as possible. So trying to find trample in maybe something like Rancor, trying to find lifelink in maybe an enchantment that gives lifelink, or an equipment like Shadow Spear, can help Mundo get into the red zone really aggressively. And that was kind of the goal for this one. I wanted it to provide a really straightforward game plan. Hello, here is my big boy, and I would like for him to visit your face with his fists. And there's not really many you can't gain life replacement effects in the game, so I thought that was pretty interesting, where it's kind of an upside, and you're presenting a race where you basically say, I think I can kill you faster than you can kill me, and so that downside of me not being able to gain life to stabilize is mitigated. So I do think that is kind of interesting. How do you build this? Do you put lots of life gain in this, that Mundo gets bigger? Or if Mundo is dead, you can recover by gaining a bunch of life. So something like Aetherflux Reservoir actually reads whenever you cast a spell for your storm count, put a +1 counter on Dr. Mundo. And then when Dr. Mundo dies in combat, you gain a bunch of life for the spell you cast afterwards, or something like that. Or do you just focus on fighting as many things and then trying to connect with the face? I think it is pretty interesting card to try and design around. So let's move on to our next champion. Up next is Ivern Reforester. Ivern is a great support character who creates bush and denies vision by creating shrubbery that you can hide in. And so I use that as a key mechanic to search lands out of your deck, which I think makes sense. And so Ivern is a colorless green, blue, white, 1/5 legendary creature Refolk with reveal your hand with no land cards in it. Search your library for up to 3 basic land cards and put them into your hand, then shuffle. And then for a green, blue, and a white, discard a land. Return any number of target spells to their owner's hands. Their controllers all draw a card and untap a land. I think this is a really, really interesting playstyle because it's a pseudo-control type deck. And it has 3 really obvious card inspirations that come together to make this legendary creature. So I will bring them up. We've got Land Grant, which you new Magic the Gathering players will not be very familiar with, but us old heads that ran Charbelcher before MTFCs exist will know Land Grant because it allows you to cast it for free and search your deck for a forest and put it into your hand. Again, before we had Once Upon a Time and all that good shit, we had Land Grant. Also, Land Tax, where this has been a commander stable for some time. If an opponent has more lands than you in your upkeep, you can search for 3 basic lands and put them into your hand. And then finally, Remand, which is a counter spell, which says counter target spell. If you do, return that spell to its owner's hand, draw a card. We are trying to do all 3 of these things in one. So let's run through the text again. Reveal your hand with no land cards in it. That is the alternate casting cost for Land Grant. It says if you have no lands in your hand, you may reveal your hand instead of paying Land Grant's mana cost. That is basically what is happening here, but it is to activate the ability, which is Land Tax, search for 3 basic land cards and put them into your hand. And then, for 3 mana, 1 of each band color, and discarding a land. So it's not a thing you can do infinitely, very easily, but if you have many, many basic lands in your deck, you can potentially do it many turns. It does let you untap a land, so if you have a land that taps for multiple things, there's not very many lands that tap for multiple different colors at once, so there's also that. But then you pay the 3, you discard a land, and then you return any number of target spells. So targeting 1 spell is a 3 mana Remand, but that player draws a card, not you. And then if there's a big stack, there's just like a bunch of shit on there, there's a whole bunch of counter magic and all this kind of stuff, you can return it all to their hands, everyone draws a card, and you untap a land. So what's really interesting here is that if everyone's fighting over something, you can clear the stack with Ivern. Basically, you clear the stack. It's also stifleable, so people could stifle Ivern, but you clear out the stack, and none of those cards are wasted. It's just slowing things down. So if you see something on the stack that can potentially end the game, and they're unable to cast it again, even with the extra untapped land, then Ivern is perfect. They can, put all the stuff back. It's also a counterspell that doesn't require you casting a spell. So if you've been silenced, you can still interact meaningfully using the stack, which I also think is very important. So I don't know if this is quite good enough to be CEDH playable. Maybe if the mana cost of the second ability was a bit less or didn't exist, it was just discard a land, which is crazy broken, then it would maybe be like really competitive. But at the moment, I think it works like kind of a nice play lots of lands, pillow fort kind of deck, where you're looking at stuff like Mirari's Wake with like mana doublers to help you pay like a lot of times for the cost. But then also stuff like Wheel of Sun and Moon, where the lands that you discard get put on the bottom of your deck, and you can search them out again if you ever have no lands in hand. So there's a lot of really cool synergy pieces, and I think that makes this like a really fun to build around card. And the the upside of untapping a land and drawing a card kind of removes any feels bad things about all your shit getting countered, which I do kind of like. And Ivern is a very nice guy, so I think that's kind of feels like his character. Now, I know it's not like he's not summoning Daisy, he's not putting his shield on things. It's not a really literal translation of what his mechanics does, but I do think it captures his personality, and I do think it matches heavily with him interacting with lands as to him summoning Bush, which I appreciate. I do think that works nicely. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. The next one is Jhin. Jhin is one that I've looked at several times for the other videos, and is probably a character that I'll make multiple different versions, and you know, because I think he is very cool. He's definitely one of the ADCs that I play. And this one, I kind of wanted to lean into the meme a little bit, but also make it like kind of a fun and playable commander. So let's talk about it. This is Jhin, the final song for a colorless blue, black, and red legendary creature, human assassin, 4/4. So he is a 4/4 for 4. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, gain an experience counter. Remove 4 experience counters, discard your hand, and draw 4 cards. You may have guessed the joke that we are going for here, but he is a 4/4 for 4, and if you remove 4 experience counters, you discard your hand and draw 4 cards. Which is kind of cool. I really, after doing the Kai'Sa design, where it's basically a Bizarre bag that every single turn, I was like, okay, what kind of effects like that do I want stapled to a creature? And Jhin coming in, and then like either he kills something in combat, or you cast removal spells to kill opponent's creatures. He collects experience counters. Now, even if Jhin is removed before you can cash in, basically, they're still there. And then when you do cast him later, you can kill one thing and then go, bam, okay, here's my experience counters. I'm going to discard my hand and draw some cards. So you have a lot of gas if you are able to remove creatures off the board. It's not yours, it's specifically opponents. He has to get kills to get the rewards, which I think is very interesting. And so I picked out some cards that I think really kind of show off the inspiration for design and kind of what he's trying to do in Drown in Ichor, Meren of Clan Neltoth, and Breakthrough. Let's start with the Drown in Ichor. It's a creature removal spell. It gives -4/-4 to a target creature, but then you proliferate. This is really, really strong here because it means you will get 2 experience counters, essentially, instead of 1, helping Jhin tick up faster. And then the Meren of Clan Neltoth is kind of where the experience counters inspiration comes from, except Meren cares about your creatures dying. That's how you get experience counters. And then, based on how many experience counters, Meren either reanimates something or returns a creature to your hand, which is kind of what we're doing here with the second mode, except you're discarding your hand and you're looking for new things rather than returning old things. And that's kind of where Breakthrough comes in. Breakthrough is draw 4 cards, then choose X cards in your hand and discard the rest from it. Weirdly, there's no, like, discard your hand and then draw to an amount that is this high. There's a lot that is draw 2 cards, so you go to a hand size of 2. I really want a Jhin to make you draw to a hand size of 4, because it's a bit harder to trigger that clause. And I think it fits fine. It's a little bit more like Judge from Pokemon TCG, where it's just kind of resetting to 4 cards in hand. And so I think it kind of works. It's kind of fun. It's definitely a spell slingy kind of deck where you're looking at as many spells in Grixis that kill a creature and get you a different upside. So something like Searing Blood, which deals damage to a creature and then deals damage to its controller. Something like Drown in Ichor, which lets you proliferate. Trying to think of other good examples. Maybe creatures that enter and kill stuff like Orcish Bowmasters goes pretty good here. Where you're getting the upside of collecting the experience, but then also building out your board state, which I do really like here. I think this is a fun card. This is definitely a card that I would like to sleeve up for Commander, just because the game plan is like really transparent with what you're doing with your opponent. And so like you go, well, I'm playing Jhin, you know I'm going to be trying to kill all of your stuff, and then they either all gang up on you or they try and react accordingly. But you have a lot of gas to try and keep up that tempo, which is fun, is cool, and I like Jhin as a character kind of generally. Alright, we up to our last character. And may I say, this is potentially the best one. We are talking about LeBlanc. Now, LeBlanc is kind of the character behind the shadows that orchestrates a lot of stuff, and really gave me a Queen Marchesa vibe. And so that was kind of what I designed her around. So getting into it, this is LeBlanc, Throne Puppeteer, one colorless, white, black, red, legendary creature, human wizard, 3/4. When LeBlanc enters, choose a player to become the monarch. Creatures you control have Dethrone and Usurper. And then the Usurper keyword reminder text is, creatures with Usurper deal 2 additional damage to players that are the monarch when dealing combat damage. This is the first time in this series that I've created a new keyword for one of these cards. And I think it's specifically fitting into the monarch dethrone kind of context. Having something like Usurper is a really cool keyword to add to this. Now, I will put up on screen the 2 cards that inspired this. Is very obviously Queen Marchesa and Marchesa the Black Rose, where they're both basically the same character, but dealing with different eras of that kind of commander and conspiracy product release, right? So Queen Marchesa enters, you become the monarch, and if you are the monarch, you make assassins to help you retain being the monarch. Marchesa the Black Rose gives all of your guys dethrone, where whenever you attack a creature with the most life, they get +1/+1 counters. And so LeBlanc is trying to do a same thing. She does overlap a little bit with Marchesa because she's giving all of the creatures dethrone, and then she is slightly better by giving players Usurper, but she requires somebody to be the monarch. You can pick yourself if you want the extra card draw, or you choose an opponent that you know you are going to attack this turn, and then, you know, possibly an opponent that has the most life total, and then your creatures with dethrone, all of your creatures are going to get +1/+1 counter when they attack that player, and then also your Usurper, that other keyword, your Usurper creatures will deal 2 additional damage. So it's like really good if you have a lot of weenies, or you have something like Double Strike, and then you'll be able to deal a bunch more damage to that player to helpfully kill the king rather than king make, which I think is kind of cool. I actually really like this design. This is definitely one that I would like to sleeve up, because a lot of the Mardu commanders, especially that's available on Brawl, is just like really go face combat. And you're, because a Queen Marchesa is not available on Brawl. I made a video about that recently also. This is a card that I like very much and would very much like to play with online. And I think Monarch is a great mechanic to play on Arena. Anyway, go and watch that video, please. And I think interacting with the Monarch, so the person who has dealt damage to the Monarch most recently becomes the Monarch, so that is going to move around a lot. And then also interacting with the player which has the most life is a really interesting way to kind of manipulate combat, which I think is really cool. So that is 4 new League of Legends champions reimagined as Magic the Gathering Commander cards. Do you have a favorite from the set so far? Is one of these something that you would sleeve up and play? I know a bunch of them I would be. I still think Kai'Sa is maybe my favorite, but I think perhaps LeBlanc is a close second. Do you have any requests for champions for me to check out in the future? A favorite of yours that you would be interested to see what a Magic the Gathering version would look like? Please get in the comments and just write me a novel. I love reading novels in the comments. Most of them are about how terrible I am at Blood on the Clock Tower or Demon Bluff, so it is nice to hear about Magic the Gathering for a change. And then, you know, stick around. I'm going to put up the playlist on the screen. You can watch some of the other videos. God forbid you learn about some of the other League of Legends champions that I made Magic cards for. Wouldn't that be sick? And then right next to that, while you're dragging your mouse across from the frowny face you're drawing over my eyes, is the subscribe button, which you can also click, and it turns it into a happy face. Turns me into the happy face. And then if lots of people do like this video, I will continue this series. I'll make more cool League of Legends champions, Magic the Gathering Commander cards, and then maybe also look into some other franchises. Also, are there other favorite characters of yours that you would love to see a Magic card for? Maybe I'm headed that way next, so stick around.